Welcome everyone to the Online Equity Conference. Hope you've been able to enjoy the first few sessions today. My name's Chelsea Cohen. I come from Laney College, Oakland. I'm an ESOL teacher. I'm also a professional development coordinator for our district, Peralta District, and I'm moderating this session. I'm just going to go over a few logistical items with you. So first, the session's being recorded. You'll be able to find other recorded sessions at our YouTube channel. I'll link to that in the chat. You can use the Zoom captions at the bottom of the Zoom window. You'll see the closed caption button, and you'll be able to turn them on and off as you prefer. Feel free to add questions in the chat during the session. And that's about it. I would like to introduce our two presenters. We have Gina Riley and Kenny Hirschmann from CUNY Hunter College, and they will be discussing faculty perspectives on HyFlex instructional challenges and strategies. Ooh, mouthful. All right, I'll turn it over to you two.
Thank you so much, Chelsea. Gina Riley, Hunter College, my colleague Kenny Hirschmann and I are going to talk about a study that we have done and are continuing to do. And I'll have Kenny introduce this study. So I'm going to share my screen. And Kenny, if you want to go ahead and introduce yourself and our study.
Sure. So my name is Kenny Hirschmann. I run the Frankfurt Center for Learning and Scholarly Technologies at Hunter College School of Education. And I am an educational technologist by trade. And as we mentioned earlier, almost Dr. Hirschmann. So we've been working on this research now for about a year and a half. Maybe to start off, let's talk about what is HyFlex teaching and learning. Let's all get on the same page. If you have any thoughts about what you might describe as HyFlex, please feel free to add them into the chat. But generally speaking, HyFlex stands for hybrid flexible, and it's a model of education that incorporates multi-modes of instruction. That would include in-person learning, online synchronous learning, and possibly online asynchronous, although not necessarily in every case, but often that is the case. The other thing that's unique and characteristic about HyFlex is that the way that students participate is flexible. So they can choose from week to week how they want to participate with the class. So they may have something going on in their lives. Maybe they have to go to a wedding or something, and so they want to do asynchronous learning one week. The next week, maybe they have to stay home with the kids, so they do online synchronous learning. And then the next week they choose, I want to be with my classmates and my teacher, and I want to, be able to experience that group setting. And so they come in person. And that's perfectly okay. Every single week you can choose something new. And that's something that makes HyFlex very unique in that it provides a lot of student choice. And so that's one of the main benefits of HyFlex instruction, is that students can choose how they want to learn. It's very personalized, and it gives them autonomy, it gives them agency in their learning. It allows learning to happen from anywhere, literally anywhere, in the classroom, outside of the classroom, or asynchronously. It could just be absolutely anywhere. It also really aligns well with universal design for learning and universal design principles, generally speaking, especially the principle of engagement that allows for autonomy in a student's learning experience.
So when we talk about HyFlex, right, there's two perspectives to consider. And one is the student perspective, right? Students get to choose how they interact with the curriculum. And so that has quite a unique perspective to it. And the other thing is the faculty perspective, right? Because faculty have all sorts of things that they do behind the scenes and within the classroom to make the HyFlex experience a beneficial one for their students. So in this, we're going to talk about student perspective, but we're going to especially talk about faculty perspective and maybe some of the challenges that faculty have seen. We know the benefits, right? The benefits of flexibility, the benefits of student choice and autonomy and intrinsic motivation. We know the benefits of UDL when it comes to HyFlex. But what we want to do is talk about some of the challenges and how faculty can mitigate those challenges.
So we started off with, in our research, with a literature review. And we reported on this a year ago at the site conference. But the problem with the literature is that it's very limited in that there's a small pool of literature that's available, and a lot of it is very anecdotal, or it's not very generalizable in that sense. We have a lot of anecdotal experience as well from what we've done in our classrooms, but we were really interested in hearing from a large number of people about what their experiences were, and trying to really understand what some of those main challenges were. And a literature review wasn't enough to be able to learn that, although we learned quite a bit, which formed the foundation of our survey. And one thing that we discovered is that the challenges can be described in these 4 general domains. The challenges related to the space, the physical space, the virtual space, and also the combination of the two, which we'll call representational space. The technology challenges, the lack of familiarity perhaps, or the complexity of technology that's involved. The pedagogical challenges, how can instructors best utilize this multimodality system to really get students to learn effectively in all modalities, and also what are the challenges that students face when engaging in this kind of work.
I think that when you're looking at these specific challenges, right, in terms of classroom space, again, your classroom in HyFlex is an in-person as well as a virtual classroom. So you're not only thinking about things like classroom size and layout, noise and lighting, but you're also thinking about what your virtual classroom looks like, right? Also, you're thinking about what the participants' classroom is at the time. And it might be at home, it might be in a cafe, it might be elsewhere. You also have to think about your learning management system and what types of design that has for all students, in person, sync, and async. In terms of pedagogical challenges, there's always that challenge of group interaction in a classroom where there's both a in-person and virtual element. From the student and from the instructor side, there's that divided attention, right? Thinking about, okay, I have my what I call roomies in the room, and then I also have what I call Zoomies on Zoom. And how do I divide my attention in that way? There's also the student engagement challenge, as well as instructor workload and cognitive overload that happens when planning and executing a HyFlex course. In terms of technological challenges, right, you have the availability of technology, what your in-person technology looks like, as well as what learning management system that your university or college uses, as well as audio quality of Zoom or Google Meet or WebEx or whatever you're using. You also have that kind of virtual telepresence, right? Is it the same? And some people will say it's not, right? What does your teaching style look like both on Zoom and in the room? There's that learning curve in terms of technology when it comes to HyFlex because you're managing 3 different modalities. And then there's also async tools that you might want to use within the classroom, and you have to kind of learn how in-person students might navigate those tools as well as virtual students. And then you have the student challenges, right? The students are looking at an in-person classroom, but they're also in their own virtual space, looking at a virtual classroom and participating in that. So students have to be sort of self-managed. They're choosing, right? There's a lot of choice and autonomy included in HyFlex, but that also takes some management. Then there's the student-to-student collaboration and communication. How do you get students on Zoom and in person to collaborate together? How do you get Zoomies even to collaborate together in breakout rooms and then in-person students in their own space? And then there's instructor proficiency, which of course affects student challenge.
Just to also contextualize, these are what we found in the literature, and also through our own experiences. And again, these formed the basis for the survey that we gave to our participants. So we did a survey with faculty. Right now, we're working mostly on the faculty side. We sent over 70 invitations out to faculty throughout the City University of New York system, to faculty members, instructors that had taught in HyFlex either last spring, summer, or fall. And we received back 19 responses from 6 different campuses. Uh, and we are still accepting responses, and now we've also opened it up so that we can recruit from all schools. So we'll share a link at the end as well if you're teaching in HyFlex or would like to share this in your own school with others who might be teaching in HyFlex, because we're still collecting data on this. We have a sample that includes all different kinds of subjects, a lot from education. We have several economics and art courses. We have business courses, engineering. We have foreign language learning, marketing, so many different areas. And we expect to see that grow. Most of the class sizes that we saw were about 10 to 25 students, which seems pretty average. And then we had a little bit, I think we had a few more that were smaller and then some that were larger as well. And interestingly, of our participants, 80% of them had, this was not their first time teaching HyFlex. And 72% of them reported that they were comfortable with HyFlex. And yet, as we'll see, they all experienced some sort of challenges, that it doesn't matter how experienced you are, it's going to happen one way or another.
In terms of preparation, more than 80% spent at least a moderate amount of time preparing. But only 32% had the help of a technologist, and only 26% had help teaching the course. So this didn't surprise me, at least, right? We tend to do a lot of things ourselves as faculty members, but educational technologists can be such a big help. In terms of student participation, again, the focus is on autonomy, choice, and intrinsic motivation. And so when we think about like our students, right, we had about 36% of participants reporting students attended face-to-face. And then most students, right, tend to report online synchronous, and you have a small percentage of students in this survey that faculty reported reporting online async. And so one of the questions we asked is, what challenges have you encountered or do you expect to see in HyFlex instruction? And so most instructors or faculty responding to the survey said, listen, like, I know my college and university environment, sometimes there is unreliable technology, not only in the college or university environment, but also on the student side. They thought maybe they'd encounter or have encountered changes engaging in small group work, some ambient noise encounters, challenges capturing students on video, and capturing the instructor on video. A lot of HyFlex technology, right? Like we're all sitting here on Zoom, but if you are in a HyFlex room and you are providing instruction in person, unless you have really high-tech cameras that move with you, right? Sometimes it's hard to capture that instructor on video.
Our second question was, what challenges have your students encountered or do you expect to see in HyFlex instruction? And we also were looking at both students in person and students that were online. So for the in-person results, the most common responses here were communicating with other students was challenging, feeling connected with each other, so creating that cohesive environment, and seeing the online students. Maybe they saw a presentation, but they didn't actually see the students' faces, unless perhaps they had their own computers open and online. For those who were online, they experienced issues with internet connectivity and Wi-Fi access. Again, communicating with the in-person students, so that communication between students was a major issue. Also feeling connected with each other and with the group. So the group cohesiveness is something that's very important. And then being in an environment where they're distracted. Some other challenges that were that we didn't necessarily ask about, but that were provided, things like the quality of audio pickup, the appropriateness of the classroom that they were in. There were some students that were driving during class, not a good thing, or that the professor was in the class alone and everyone else was online. And I've actually seen that here. It's quite funny to see, but I'm sure to experience is not so funny. And then a lack of appropriate technology available in that space.
So question number 3, and I love that you're all chatting. Keep chatting, right? Because I want to hear and respond to all your chats. What strategies have you employed or would expect to use to mitigate these challenges? So faculty said, like, I want to be a clear and consistent communicator. I want to communicate to my students what is accepted of them, and be a clear and consistent communicator within syllabi and other written forms of communication. Establishing class norms for engagement is something that faculty reported helpful. Also discussing HyFlex teaching in class, as well as visiting the space ahead of time, right? You are like, as a faculty member, you do want to visit that space. You want to take a look at the technology available. You also want to see how your classroom is designed and situated. Other faculty said, yes, I absolutely not only visited the room, but also reviewed available technology. So my favorite part of this study, and Kenny, I'll have you continue, is, that we not only looked at the challenges, but we also wanted to think about, how can faculty have strategies in their back pocket to mitigate those challenges? And I think the first thing is to start planning early, right? When you're teaching a HyFlex course, you want to think about not only your perspective as faculty, but also student perspective. I am so always grateful for Kenny, who is our instructional designer and technologist at the School of Education at Hunter College. And those consultations are really important, right? They're so very helpful. So I think it's really important that faculty remember, don't be afraid to ask for help. I've always thought as a faculty member that designing the asynchronous course first helps me. It helps me gather materials. It helps me think about my lectures. And when I'm videotaping my lectures, it really helps in my in-person lecture because I've already practiced and rehearsed it, right? So there are so many benefits to designing the asynchronous modules in HyFlex first. I also am always thinking about UDL principles when it comes to HyFlex, right? Thinking about how I engage students not only visually, but also auditorily, also with different forms of engagement. So that application of UDL principles, which is such a strength of HyFlex, is really applicable here.
Some other challenges or ways to mitigate the challenges that oh, did we go back? Did we skip one? Okay, there we go. Um, uh, Viewing the classroom in advance, I think, is, as we mentioned earlier, one of the issues that people identified was not having appropriate technology in the space. And by viewing a classroom in advance and getting to know what technology is available to you, it gives you the opportunity to request other technology that you might need, or just to make other arrangements that would be best support what you're trying to do. The seating arrangement, again, viewing the classroom gives you an idea of what's there, but then thinking about, how am I going to capture everyone in this space? How do I seat everyone in a way that it's going to be conducive to that virtual representation? Get to know what support is available. That could be instructional design or instructional technology support or IT. pedagogical support, anything, any services or support organizations within your school. Get to know what those are, and participate in whatever trainings they offer. Or maybe you'll find some trainings online that you can take part in. It sounds to me like there's a couple of people in this room that have designed some HyFlex trainings, which is fantastic, and we'd love to give you an opportunity to talk about that in a little while. Um, this is a great mantra for everyone. Keep it simple and make do with what you've got. You're not always going to be in an ideal situation with all the technology that you could possibly ever want. Um, but if you keep things simple and try not to overcomplicate pedagogically what you're trying to do, then you can usually do with quite a bit less in terms of technology. As Gina mentioned earlier, setting clear expectations and being clear and consistent. Consistency is very important and comprehensive in those communications. And being transparent about HyFlex. Gina, you do this a lot. You talk about the HyFlex modality in the course, and of course, we teach education here, and so that's important that students that we're modeling what students might be able to do in their own classrooms, but also just to kind of open it up so that people know what to expect.
It's so interesting that you say that, right? I often call our classroom like the fishbowl, right? Because you have like the in-person and you have the online students. And just talking about the environment is helpful, right? I'll also like unmute everyone at the beginning of class so they have that like cross chatter so that in-person students talk to virtual students talk to in-person students. I really want to create a HyFlex classroom culture in my classroom. And that is really, really important. It is unlike being in a totally in-person classroom or being in a totally online space. So in terms of a research roadmap, we've done a literature review, and now, as Kenny had said, we have that expanded faculty survey that, again, you're all so welcome to participate in. Kenny, I don't know if you want to talk more about that.
Sure, if you could switch to the next page.
Ah,
So this is the link for our survey. If you are teaching using HyFlex, or if you know somebody who is teaching in HyFlex and can share this with them, we would love to have you participate in our survey, um, so that we can continue to collect more information about this and learn about it across the country and how things are happening in all different environments.
yeah, and I think because HyFlex is such a barely researched area, right? Having more research, having more faculty participate is so important. It just allows people to think about like not only the benefits, which are great, but also the challenges of HyFlex and how to mitigate those challenges.
So the next step, of course, is we're interested in surveying students and seeing what the student experience is like. So that's something that we're working towards for next semester. And down the road, we want to establish some best practices, some design principles, and see what applications can be used for HyFlex, across domains.
And here's our references. And of course, like Brian Beattie's handbook is referenced, which if you haven't read it is so very helpful. Our article is referenced, which is again, like the literature review to this study, as well as links to HyFlex at CUNY and UDL and scaling HyFlex.
And
So
we have a new one too that is not even in there yet.
yeah, it's so exciting. Um, And I think so. We want to open it up, and I think we can just open it up to all of you. I kind of want to catch up on chat, but I also want to hear your experiences, the benefits, the challenges, the things that you're thinking. And there's so much good stuff going on in chat. I'm so excited.
Anything that resonated with you, or anything you'd like to add to what we discussed.
Rena.
Hi, yes, thank you so much for this workshop. This is great. And I actually really wish that our college offered more, the HyFlex opportunities for students. I'm a student accessibility services counselor at Laney College, and I've worked with many students who have a hard time finding a class accessible for their disabilities in terms of the modality that works for them. And the nice thing about how HyFlex is that both students who are immunocompromised or high risk or have mobility challenges and really, prefer the online or for some students, online is the only modality accessible to them. And then also some students learn better in face-to-face. Like there's quite a variety. So it's great because it can accommodate both, both. But currently we don't really have that. So one thing I want to check is, as an accessibility counselor, what can I do in terms of advocating, and there's a lot of resistance and a lot of challenges, like kind of walls that like, no, this is not going to happen. So I'm just wondering, what can I do to help increase this opportunity for our students as an accessibility counselor?
I'm happy to take this and then Kenny, I'm going to give it to you. I mean, I think I'm from a Department of Special Education, and you're so right. Like this has opened up a world for students with both visible and invisible disabilities. And just the fact that there's choice too. It's not always that you have to have class online. If you want to join in person, that's wonderful too, when you feel up to it or when you feel better. So I think two things have been helpful to me. And the first thing is our Office of Accessibility has been really wonderful in talking about HyFlex courses in their newsletters and in sort of conversations with departments. I think a lot of people don't even know what a HyFlex course is and the benefits to students. So just like opening up that conversation, I think is really, really helpful.
I agree. We're very lucky. We work in an institution, not just at Hunter College, but the whole City University of New York that sees the value of HyFlex, and there is HyFlex learning that's happening in all 23 campuses at the City University of New York. But what I would say is, if you're facing resistance, share the research. Talk about the benefits. It doesn't really require a tremendous change for things. It's really just kind of adding on to what's already there, some options. Um, it does involve some technology, but perhaps your school already has the technology available to make it happen. So doing a feasibility study, perhaps, to share with them, this is, I took a look and I saw this is what it would cost for us to upgrade some of our classrooms, or just doing the legwork to share with them that perhaps it's not as heavy a lift as they think it might be.
I also think there was a comment about distance learning with a slightly lower reimbursement from the state. I've actually been looking into this with the New York State Ed Department. And some HyFlex courses are considered in person, right? So like it's actually not an online modality per se, because you do have that in-person requirement. And so I'm not sure how the laws and regulations are in your state, but know that we've been thinking about this in New York State. I know Ingrid had a question and she has all these helpful handouts, so I want to know everything.
Hey, thanks so much for this awesome workshop. And I just shared in Zoom chat some resources. And one of the strongest arguments you can make for HyFlex is what other colleges are already doing and what we've done. And so I did share the College of Continuing Education in San Diego. Our enrollment kind of speaks for itself. Thousands of students have been enrolled in HyFlex, and college deans, one of their arguments for HyFlex is especially return to campus after the pandemic or launching a new program. HyFlex kind of guarantees stable enrollment, right? You can draw from the on-campus rumor enrollment and the online Zoom enrollment, and it's a great way to return to campus or to launch a new course, or a professor has an idea, hey, I really want to try this, but I don't know if it'll fly either fully online or on campus. So I just shared with you some really strong enrollment data for HyFlex, and then a handout I'll be presenting at the Instructure conference. So and I wish I had time to publish. If you want me to co-author with you, and I'll just share my data in a small section of a future article, let me know. I'm kind of busy as a distance education leader at my college. So there you go. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And you make a really excellent point that, sometimes it's the bottom line that matters more than anything. And if you can increase enrollment by offering a course in multiple modalities, that's a win-win. Now you also have to balance that with the fact that a lot of instructors just don't want to do this kind of work, either because it's too much effort, or they just don't understand how to make it work well. And so having professional development programs available, having the right technology available can all help to, to move the needle a bit, but it's a long road.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, sorry. I love that you said that, right? Because one of the challenges is faculty thinking, my gosh, this is so much work. And I will tell you, right, in terms of being able to design courses in different modalities really helps you as an instructor in all modalities, right? So yes, it's work, but the work is worth it, I'm always saying. And it's not a ton more work, right? Because if you were teaching online, you would have that async course available anyway. And so again, you're just taking that async material and you're providing it in a sync and in-person manner. So again, work tends to be really, really worth it. I'm loving all these comments in the chat, and I'm just wanting to address every single one. Chelsea, I know you have your hand raised too.
I just want to acknowledge Elizabeth's question in the Q&A as well. She asked, if you would love to hear your thoughts about the potential role of generative AI in HyFlex instruction and design.
Yeah, Kenny's been doing so much work on it, and then I'm just gonna chatter in. I think AI is changing not only the HyFlex field, but also the field of instructional design in general. Kenny has been working really hard in providing tools and having us as faculty be trained on those tools. AI is here to stay, and I think that the messaging is right. It's just up to us to be trained on those tools, to play with our students in terms of how to use them and how to use them responsibly, right? If you remember years and years ago, everyone was scared of Wikipedia, and now Wikipedia is something that just, our students look up, but they don't heavily rely on it. And so just thinking about that, right? It's here to stay. It's time to play, but it's also time to teach our students how to use it responsibly, as well as ourselves how to use it responsibly. And Kenny, you are my expert here, so go for it.
I find AI to just be a really great thought partner. It's fantastic for when you get stuck and you need to just come up with some new ideas that you haven't thought of before. Although I will say that crafting prompts is an art of its own, and really makes a big difference when you're working with AI if you know how to properly craft prompts. And there's a lot of information that's available out there if you just search for it. But I've been using it quite a bit to design workshops. It helps me to articulate learning objectives. It helps me to give really nice blurbs of workshops. It helps me to identify what kind of information should be on my slide decks. It helps to sort of break down and create outlines for me of what I need to be looking at. It even gives me ideas for activities. It's really quite incredible what information you can get out of the AI in this area. So giving if you put in something, for example, saying I'm teaching a HyFlex course, I need ideas for how to engage students both in person and online at the same time, you might get some really great suggestions from the AI.
Irina, I'm looking at your other comment with regards to different audio and different ways that HyFlex can be done. Yeah, so a lot of people use the owl. I use like a little Logitech camera, right? And it's just on a tripod. So I do really simple HyFlex. It shouldn't cost a ton of money, right? It doesn't have to. There are amazing HyFlex setups where you're like, oh, I wish that I had that at my university. We're at a public university, right? So it shouldn't be as hard as it seems.
There were a couple of people here who mentioned that they were, I think Jenna, was it? You mentioned something about you're about to launch HyFlex 2.0. Can you tell us what that is?
Yes, so Allie is here with me. We're both instructional designers at a community college in Delaware. HyFlex was very new last fall to our college. We did receive lots of great funding to, fit out a lot of our campuses. We have 4 campuses throughout Delaware, and we finally have a rein on everything. So we have 19 new instructors that are looking to teach in the HyFlex modality. So they're going to be joining us in 2 weeks for a true training course that we're going to model it in the HyFlex format ourselves to show them what it looks like. We've created a shell course in our LMS to give them an idea of how we take our learning activities to make them work across all the modalities, and just kind of, we call it, how do you HyFlex your current lessons? And if we can have that mentality, how you mentioned, if you design for an async course, you have a great foundation. So when we do a lot of our course builds as instructional designers, that's our main responsibility. If we start designing with HyFlex in mind, or just a really good async course, it'll make it so much easier on the instructors to just worry about the in-class activities of, how are you going to get the handout to everyone? How do you want them to access this link that you want to drop in the chat? Well, what about the people who are sitting in front of you? And just thinking ahead about all of these items. So we're really excited. I'm really looking forward to it.
Congratulations, because that sounds amazing.
Thanks.
Has your school actually launched HyFlex yet?
Yes, we currently have, I want to say 12 instructors that are still with us. Delaware's a real small state, to be honest with you. And so it wasn't a big, large push at first. I think it was, a great idea, and there just needed to be a little more planning behind it. So now that we have a really good structure in place, I think a lot more are excited and willing, and it's not so scary. I was a K-12 teacher with the Zoomers and Roomers, and I think it's just more about how you approach it and planning ahead of time, which I know seems like a feat at first, but once you get the hang of it, it really does just make all the other classes you teach easier by having that plan.
Yep. And somebody also mentioned something about some technology, and I just wanted to make a point that there are a lot of different tools out there. Somebody mentioned the meeting owls and rally bars, but they can also be very expensive. The meeting owls like $1,000. The rally bars are about $3,000 or $4,000. So that's not necessarily a realistic expectation in every single classroom. But there are much more affordable ways that you can make something work. For example, we just bought last year, we bought a bunch of Logitech Brios, which are a small high definition camera, webcam, put them on a tripod, and put them in the classrooms. And it has actually an excellent microphone. It works really well for a smaller size classroom, up to 20, 25 people. And yes, it's not the same quality as Rally Bar or Meeting Owls. I found to be somewhat temperamental if there's a lot of ambient sound in the room, including air conditioners. So there's a lot that you can do with very little. You just have to be creative and incorporate the support mechanisms that you have in place. So people like Jenna and Allison are great people to go to if you're looking to do HyFlex teaching and learning, because they understand the technology, they understand the pedagogy, and can put those two things together in effective ways.
I also love how someone mentioned HyFlex PD and meetings. And thinking about how HyFlex is not only amazing for classrooms, and I love how some of you have HyFlex K-12 experience. Myself and Jerry Rivera just published a chapter in Brian Beattie's book on HyFlex K-12. But in terms of like professional development and meetings, this is like a huge space, right? It's not only students that have all these attendance needs, it's also our faculty. And to open up your spaces in terms of meetings and professional development in HyFlex does get you more attendance, it gets you more participation from all sides. And so thinking about that and the structure of that, I think is really important. It's a huge, huge market in terms of professional development now.
Can I ask a quick question about just teaching? Like, how does it work for those experts in the room? Because I try to navigate in person for professional development, in-person crowd and groups with Zoom attendees. It is hard. How do you be your best self as a teacher in two modalities at once? I know that's a really huge question. There's probably not a clear answer to, but I'm just curious what your thoughts are.
I want everyone to answer, and I'm just going to say, like, that creation of a HyFlex classroom culture is really important for both my students and myself. So when I walk into that room, right, I know that my technology works because I've tested and prepared. We've talked about HyFlex as a conversation in a class, so everyone kind of knows how it works. They also know that my attention may be divided at some points because I am attending to both Zoom attendees and in person. But I mean, I call my group Zoomies and Roomies, and I do. It's like, what do the Zoomies have to say? What do the Roomies have to say? Right. And we have these interactive discussions. But I will say, just as you would like create a classroom culture for any other classroom, the creation of a HyFlex classroom culture is really important. And to be in HyFlex instructor mode as a faculty member, it does take like a different layer of thought. I've been in online education since 1998. So like I'm confident with the online stuff, right? And it's that like online in person that again takes a lot of thought and preparation, but being there, establishing that culture, like first class, we talk about HyFlex, we talk about what it's going to look like. We try out things. So we talk about what it looks like from a Zoom perspective, as well as from an async or an in-person perspective. And I always tell students, right, like choice is important. You know, your choice is one that has to work for you, right? You have to make this autonomous decision how you attend class. Don't just think of like the environmental elements, but also think of how you best learn and how you best attend. So for me, it's like all about this conversation. I'll do a pre-survey, I'll do a post-survey, and the student feedback has been so helpful.
I think a lot of it is also about self-awareness, knowing what your strengths are and the areas that you need some support, and reaching out for the support in those areas that are maybe not strengths for you. So, you know, if, for example, technology is not a strength for a lot of instructors, and if that is true for you, then reaching out to an instructional technologist to answer your questions about how do I engage these groups simultaneously using the technology, what's the best technology to use in order to do that, and what are the suggestions that you might be able to make for how what I can do to be effective with both of these groups. That's what I think a smart instructor would do. No one person has all of those answers, and everyone has things that they are strong in and that they need additional support in. And just having that self-awareness to know when you need help and asking for it, I think is huge in this, especially in this kind of situation, because there's so many factors and there's so much going on that you really have to kind of have 6 hands and 2 heads to make it work.
I love, yeah. And from a faculty perspective, like I'm always thinking like, don't ignore the Zoomies, right? My students on Zoom. And that's why I open the mics early on, right? So the first 5-10 minutes of class, like the mics are open because I want the class to know there are people on Zoom that are not gonna, they're gonna actively engage, right? They're not gonna sit there passively. They're gonna be involved in all of the classroom activities, and sort of creating that setup right away helps all students understand that, right? Like the instructor has both the people on Zoom as well as the people in person. They're going to navigate that. But we also, as students, have a responsibility to all of our classmates, including those who might participate async. So like my in-person students will also like be on those discussion boards and be on those Padlets and like participate with my async students, because I just want all, right, like that equitable space is really important.
That is an important point too, that asynchronous can often get lost in the sauce. Especially if you design asynchronous, but then incorporate the synchronous elements to it. When you're in the moment, you're focused on those students that are in front of you. You're not really focused so much on the students that are participating later, but also what sort of interaction is taking place between those asynchronous students and the synchronous students, I think is equally as important, because, as Gina said earlier, the climate, the culture that you're creating in a HyFlex class is very different than a culture in a solely online class or solely face-to-face class. And you have to remember that you have students that are participating in all 3 of these different modalities. How are you going to have them interact is very important. What are the limitations of the technology is another thing that you have to think about. So my first semester, when I first joined Hunter College, came to Hunter College, that summer, there was a professor that was doing HyFlex teaching, and she was not really in a space that was conducive for it. And she would walk around the room with a webcam, just like this. And then she would have students pick up their laptops and meet in small groups. And there was, several of the small groups had one person from online and a bunch of people face to face. And we would hear feedback coming all over the place. And it was terrible because she didn't understand what the impact of the technology would be on her teaching style. Therefore, she did not change her teaching style to accommodate the affordances and limitations of this modality. And so we worked together and we were able to make some improvements over the course of the summer, but it's hard once you've already started to make a lot of changes. That's why preparation is so key in this situation. You cannot expect to go into a HyFlex classroom with 0 preparation and do well. It's something that you have to prepare for in advance, not just at the very beginning in the design of the course, but also each class. What am I going to do? What are the activities that I'm going to engage my students into? And how are they going to interact with each other? Are very key questions that you may not always have the answers to, but there are probably people around you that can support you with that.
I do want to be mindful of time. We are due to have another session soon and should end now. But I just want to thank the presenters, Gina, Kenny. Thank you so much for this thought-provoking discussion. So enlightening and interesting, and I want to explore HyFlex now at my college. And thank you for the presenters for your contributions, for being here. I will put we'll put the recording up on YouTube later, and I will stop this now.